Hi everyone, welcome back to Bina007 movie reviews. Today we're focusing on Dial M for Murder, which of course is the seminal thriller by Alfred Hitchcock, released back in 1954. And the reason to talk about it today is that it's being re-released in the UK on the 26th of July in a beautiful new 3D print that's been lovingly restored by Warner Brothers. And it really is a quite amazing visual experience, and if you can get to a cinema showing it, I'd strongly encourage you to go along. Normally on this podcast, we try to avoid giving spoilers for movies, and I'm in a bit of a quandary because, of course, this film's been out for over 50 years, so you'd think everyone would know the ending. But what I'm going to try to do, because I think there's a whole generation of people who love cinema but probably haven't seen this at the cinema or indeed on DVD. So I'm going to try and review it in a spoiler-free way first, and then after the usual end credits for this podcast, do a spoiler-filled review, so be warned. Okay, so here's the spoiler-free version. In 1954, Alfred Hitchcock released this movie, Dial M for Murder, but he actually filmed it in 1953, which those of you who are cinema historians will know was the heyday, the first big wave of 3D for Hollywood, and that's the year which you had movies like House of Wax produced. But unfortunately for Hitch, by the time he got round to releasing Dial M for Murder, that 3D phase was over. It had kind of been killed by the fact that people were watching on these like really crummy 3D glasses, usually on projectors that weren't correctly aligned, and it just made for a really rubbish viewing experience. 3D was also kind of killed in the first wave by the advent of CinemaScope, which then became the big technical standard. So anyway, he had this movie, Dial M for Murder. It was released. Most people saw it in 2D. There was a 3D release, I think, in the early 80s. But this new release is Warner Brothers going back, painstakingly restoring every single frame of the movie, getting the colours back to be vivid, taking away all the scratches, and just making a new 4K scan. So what you're seeing is modern 3D technology brought to bear in this old film. And I have to say the results are absolutely stunning. I mean, the colours are vivid, the 3D's sharp, and as I'll discuss later, it just gives you a whole new perspective and admiration for what the Hitch is doing here. So on to the story. The movie started off as a play, actually, written by a guy called Fred Knott, and was a huge success on Broadway. And then Hitch got hold of it and made a movie. And what you find is that the whole movie is set basically in one flat. And it's a small flat in London, so it's really effectively one room, which is the sort of study cum lounge. And the whole movie also has basically 4 characters. So it's an incredibly claustrophobic, detailed, minute thriller. And the plot is as follows. There's an ex-tennis pro called Tony Wendis, played by a chap called Ray Milland. And he's basically quite greedy and quite jealous and realises that his beautiful younger wife, Margot, who's played by the beautiful Grace Kelly, has been cheating on him with a friend of hers called Mark Halliday, played by Robert Cummings. So he hatches this incredibly long, drawn-out plot to have his revenge, which is that he stalks an old university friend of his who he realises has fallen on hard times and blackmails him into committing the perfect murder of his wife, because he realises that that guy has no motive and he in turn will have a perfect alibi. The lover of Grace Kelly's character, Margot, says to the husband, Tony, you know what, it's very easy to write these perfect murders, but in reality something always goes wrong. And true to form, as we reach the halfway mark of this film, something does go wrong. And the genius of Hitchcock's film is to give us the wonderful, slippery, oleaginous Tony Wendis, wriggling his way apparently out of trouble and yet not, and it's genuinely tense. I mean, I watched this movie again, I know the ending, but I was still absolutely on the edge of my seat wondering how this guy was going to pull it off, if he was going to pull it off, and whether the police would finally get on his case. So this movie works when it works best as a kind of Agatha Christie, intricate, intelligent whodunit. It's like a wonderful, detailed puzzle that we try to figure out. It's not like Hitchcock's work that takes a more sort of psychological, sinister feel. So it's not like The Birds or Vertigo or indeed Psycho. It's a much kind of cleaner, simpler puzzle film in a way. In terms of how Hitchcock approached that material, his cast is great. I mean, Grace Kelly often gets criticised for being rather wooden, but I think she's rather wonderful in this film. And she does exactly what she has to do. I mean, it's by far the smallest of the parts. Ray Milland, Robert Cummings, John Williams, absolutely fantastic in the other three roles of the men. But what I think is fantastic here is seeing Alfred Hitchcock use this very small set. This was all filmed on set in Burbank. And use the 3D. So this is what was a revelation to me, seeing this in 3D. You really get a new perspective on why he's chosen certain camera angles, and the fact that you're sort of peering round lamps and furniture. You get an absolutely tangible sense of the layout of the room. And that's crucial because so much of the detail of figuring out this plot is about where someone's standing relative to a telephone, where the windows are, how the mechanism of the door lock works. And of course, in one particular scene, the camera angles he chooses just enhance the violence, enhance the emotion. It's a very expressive use of 3D and deeply impressive for a man who, after all, isn't famous for his use of 3D at all. I guess the problem with Dial M for Murder on its re-release is that the passage of time has been a little bit cruel to this film, because people in England don't speak like that anymore. The language feels very anachronistic. The social attitudes are very anachronistic. Of course, in one sense, you can watch the movie almost like watching an early season of Mad Men for that kind of social commentary and to feel kind of socially superior to it. But it does, on occasion, really bring you out of the movie. That's certainly not a fault of this particular film, but it's just a fact that we have to face. And in a movie that is a thriller, that's relying on its success for keeping you on the edge of your seat and keeping you in the movie, and that's what the 3D is doing, it's keeping you immersed in the movie. The fact that these anachronistic uses of language take you out of it jarringly is, of course, a failure. Still, for all that, definitely worth seeing. I'm going to continue on discussing some of the spoilers of this movie after the end credits, but if you haven't seen the movie yet, I would strongly urge you to try and get a copy of it somehow. And I think you'll enjoy the new 3D experience. If you do or don't, please, as usual, leave a comment on my blog at Bina007.com. The beautifully new restored version of Dial M for Murder in 3D is going to be released in the UK on July 26th. It's opening at the BFI South Bank in London, as well as the Curzon Mayfair, the Barbican and key cities nationwide. The movie has a running time of 105 minutes and has been rated PG for, as you would expect, one scene of moderate violence. The music from today's podcast is taken from the original soundtrack of the movie, composed by Dmitry Tiomkin. Okay, so now we've got the Hitchcock versions out of the way, let's have a real discussion about this movie. The first thing to say is that the 3D definitely enhances the murder scene. The way in which Grace Kelly, when she's cornered at the telephone, reaches behind to grab the scissors, which of course are at the foreground of our shot, and so with the 3D magnified in their importance, and brings her arm up to stab her assailant, is so much more impactful than it already was in the original film. And the way in which camera angles are chosen to show her attacker, Captain Lesgate or Swan, sort of collapsing to the ground and then falling onto those scissors is just unbelievable. I mean, the 3D really does give you so much more than you already got in the original film. The other thing that I'd love to bring out in the spoiler part of this movie, I think we all who know and love this movie have our one aspect of the murder plot that we just find incredible, or we just don't quite get how it works. For some people, it's the fact that the latchkeys all look so much the same. For other people, It's who locked the door when the husband, Tony, goes off to the police station to collect Margot's belongings. But for me, the problem with this movie is, why is it that Tony went to start spending the blackmail money or the payoff money? Why doesn't he wait till after his wife has safely been executed and he's cleared probate to start flashing the cash? After all, we've been told that he does have a job. He's not entirely living off her money. So why can't he just live a bit more modestly but off his pay and not start putting these dirty onces that he's amassed over the past couple of years into circulation? Yeah, I never quite figured out why someone that cool, that patient, to stalk a man and then make him kill his wife, why he would be so impatient to settle his bills at the vintners. Never struck me as right. But anyway, those are my 2 comments I wanted to make in the spoiler section of this review. Once again, I hope you really enjoy this. It's such a treat to get this new restoration. And I hope lots of people go and see it, because it will hopefully give Warner Brothers the impetus to carry on with their great restoration work. So please do enjoy the movie, and until next time, have a great day.